What's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of Wales?
Wales is a nation shaped by many things: language, landscape, culture, and perhaps more than anything else, sport. For over a century, rugby was the heartbeat of Welsh identity, but today that rhythm is changing.
This year may be seen as a turning point, with the Welsh Rugby Union in disarray and a national side only recently ended an 18-game losing streak. A new force is rising. Football, once overshadowed, is making a claim for the heart of the nation. But how did we get here? How did rugby become Wales's dominant sport? And how has football emerged from its shadow?
But is this just part of a traditional narrative we're all just used to hearing? Or is the relationship between Wales, rugby and football far more complex than we believe?
To understand this rivalry, we'll have to travel through time, through place and identity. In this episode, we're going to be exploring the early history of the two codes, how rugby conquered the south and football the north. So where better to start than Wrexham, the cradle of Welsh football? It was as far back as 1864 that Wrexham AFC were founded, making it the third oldest football club in the world.
It was at the Turf Inn next to the racecourse ground that history in Wales was made. Members of the local cricket club would come together to play the growing winter game of football. 1 year earlier, the Football Association had been founded in England. Its list of clear laws had helped to set it apart from other codes of the game, one of which would eventually be rugby. North Wales would certainly be the birthplace of football in Wales. Following the establishment of Wrexham, other clubs in the local area would form, Druids becoming the strongest club following their establishment in 1872. Football had at least gained a foothold in the north, but rugby was slower to get going.
As more and more Welsh clubs began to form, the clamour for a national association began to grow, and it all began here in 1876 at the Wednesday Arms. The FAW was formed.
It may come as a surprise to see the FAW founded in Wrexham, given its modern home firmly placed in Cardiff. However, the early growth of football, particularly in the industrial cities of northwest England and the Midlands just across the border, meant it was here that football truly thrived. Wales played their first international football match in March 1876, losing 4-0 to Scotland. It would be another 5 years before rugby would follow suit.
2 years later, and the first Welsh Cup was played, with its final played here at a very different looking Acton Park, Wrexham. Wrexham would play in the final against Druids, where they'd win via a last minute winner. To call it a national trophy is a little bit misleading, as its scope was limited, with most of the teams coming from the northeast of the country.
The Welsh Cup had proven successful in providing the clubs of northern Wales with the opportunity to grow and compete. Competitive action was essential to the general growth of football, both in playing and in participating. It is clear that although still regional, the association game in Wales was building in popularity. Far from truly national, the Welsh Cup was still relatively a Wrexham-based competition. The inclusion of English sides Shrewsbury Town, Oswestry and North East Victoria, rather than any from South Wales, further supports claims that early football in North Wales was a cross-border exercise. Victorian sport was generally part of a wider British context, with the growth of the FA Cup providing the new Welsh clubs with their best opportunity to truly pit themselves against the best Britain had to offer.
In 1883, Wrexham and Druids would enter the FA Cup. Druids would exit in the first round, but Wrexham would benefit from a bye to enter the second round.
A narrow 4-3 defeat to Oswestry ended the club's dream of making a greater dent on the English competition, and crowd trouble after the match saw the club expelled from the FA altogether.
However, the club would be rebranded under the guise of Wrexham Olympic, perhaps a nod to the Blackburn side that won the FA Cup that season. However, that year, their FA Cup run would be ended by someone closer to home, Chirk. Chirk helped to create a 4-team strong Welsh contingent in 1884-85, with Newtown also joining Wrexham and Druids. The Druids went the furthest, losing 1-0 to West Bromwich Albion to end the Welsh challenge in the English competition. However, Chirk would go one step further than the Druids in 1887 and 1888, reaching the 5th round of the FA Cup, narrowly missing out on a first quarter final for a Welsh club.
Quite clearly, Welsh football at a club level was not there just to make up the numbers. The clubs founded in the north have proven themselves capable of some notable cup runs and successes, all of which would help the game to disseminate further across the north and into mid-Wales. Notably, this period also saw a boom in spectatorship as working men gained greater freedoms and Saturday afternoons. The collective togetherness that the association game had allowed to flourish was upwards of 7,000 spectators at the Welsh Cup final in 1896 and again in 1901.
So what does this all really mean? Well, for a start, in the north, it was the association game that took a hold of the population. Wales would even play their international games here at the racecourse ground. Football had dominated the north and was even making its mark on the south.
It's fair to say that Welsh sport's earliest days saw a genuine north-south divide, and although football would be played in the nation's major southern industrial heartlands, here rugby was king.
The first official rugby club of note was formed here in Neath. Although disputed by some, Neath RSC now claims to be the nation's oldest, formed in 1871.
Although whisper that claim quietly in Lampeter, the site of Wales's first university. It was here that some believe that rugby was even played as early as the 1850s.
If football had taken a vice-like grip of the north, the same could be said for rugby in the south. From the mid-1870s, clubs were appearing more and more frequently, like Cardiff Rugby, confusingly then named Cardiff Football Club. They played here at the Cardiff Arms Park, which would later become a symbol of Welsh identity.
Alongside Cardiff, notable clubs were founded in Newport, Llanelli, Swansea, Bridgend and Aberavon. The introduction of the South Wales Challenge Cup in 1877 provided the opportunity for these sides to produce scintillating displays of rugby, drawing in large attendances.
Rugby had conquered the industrial south in places like here in Merthyr Tydfil. Its introduction had been pivotal in creating a new Welsh identity in a place that saw immigration levels only surpassed by New York City.
The growth of the South Wales coalfields has seen large numbers of working men from Ireland and southwest England arriving in communities across the area. Like in Wales, rugby had been popular in both of these places, and the game was used as a way to bring people together in new fierce local rivalries.
By 1881, South Wales saw an explosion in participation and spectatorship in rugby. Such growth required the need for a formal association, and it was here at the Castle Hotel in Neath later that year that the WRU was formed. As with football, rugby was immediately played at an international level. The Home Nations Championship offered Wales a chance to compete against their British rivals, but success was initially limited. Without a win in the first 7 editions of the competition, something special would need to happen.
In 1893, the first Triple Crown arrived. For many, the key to achieving such a success came from a tactical change known as the 4-3-quarters. This, in simple terms, was a change in the custom of 6 backs and 9 forwards to 7 backs and 8 forwards.
Quite incredibly, this formation is still in use today. For all of its rule changes and adaptations, rugby has always been tactically conservative. Wales's brilliance in 1893 shouldn't be understated. With Wales beginning to make inroads in the Home Nations Championship, success was also seen at club level. Unlike those sides from the association game, however, matches were usually played against other local sides, generally for local pride rather than any national recognition.
The most notable competition was the aforementioned South Wales Challenge Cup. Even the name emphasises the lack of northern recognition of the rugby code. There's little doubt that football was much slower to get going in the south of Wales. Welsh internationals would primarily take place in Wrexham and even saw home fixtures in Shrewsbury before they arrived in the south.
It was here at St Helens Ground in Swansea that Wales played its first international fixture in the south. The fixture, a 4-1 victory over Ireland, was more important than geography, however, as the 7,000 spectators was the biggest ever attendance at a Welsh football match.
Reports at the time made frequent mention to the unusual nature of Wales's relationship with sport, noting that football, or soccer, was indeed closer affiliated with those from the north.
The South Wales Daily News wrote that this match's primary aim was to firmly popularise and plant football in the south. It also references the views of spectators, saying that if football was always played at this level, it was only a matter of time before it became a permanent fixture in the south.
But therein lay the problem for Welsh football, its inconsistency. Wales would only win once again before the end of the century. A dismal run of form would even see a 9-1 humbling at the hands of England in 1896. Add insult to the wounds, the match was held for the first time in Cardiff. A record crowd of 10,000 fans was unlikely to be persuaded to move away from the rugby code.
As the 20th century began, Welsh football would see some improvement. 20,000 fans packed into the Cardiff Arms Park to see a much improved Wales play against England, drawing 1-1. If more matches were played in Cardiff and here in Swansea, would the game have grown more rapidly?
It's a fair question. South Wales had grown exponentially around this time, with Cardiff even becoming a city in 1905. Football had missed its opportunity to truly become Wales' sport, and rugby was waiting for its moment to shine. Later that year, it arrived.
It would be the 16th of December 1905 that rugby firmly became the sport of Wales. The match of the century held here at the Cardiff Arms Park between Wales and New Zealand saw a Teddy Morgan try win the game for the Welsh.
The clash was billed as the match of the century and finished 3-0, a quite alien scoreline to modern day audiences.
Upon the final whistle, the euphoric home crowd would rush the pitch and carry the players on their shoulders. It was New Zealand's only defeat in 35 tour matches. Perhaps the most significant of all, it was the first time a Hen Vlad Fy Hadau, the national anthem, was sung at a major sporting event.
Legend has it that the anthem was first sung in response to New Zealand's haka, and quite incredibly, it was a Welsh player, the try scorer Teddy Morgan, who started the singing before his teammates and later the crowd joined in. The moment has gone down in history as the first time any national anthem was ever sung at a sporting event. It's hard to put it into words just how big this victory was in shaping the future of Welsh sport and its place in the nation's cultural identity. Welsh identity in sport had always been firmly part of a wider British context. Just look at the Welsh national team's badge. The three feathers, a symbol of British royalty. In football, the exploits of the sides in the English institution, the FA Cup, have provided much of the best moments of Welsh clubs, with the national team's dour performances in the British Home Championships providing little to shout about. Even the Welsh Cup had been won 4 times by English sides. Football was, however, beginning to disseminate further south, with Cardiff City formed under the name Riverside AFC in 1899. Perhaps what sets rugby apart is that here Wales were not just there to make up the numbers, they were winning. And in beating New Zealand, can lay claim to being the best nation at the sport on earth. This was the first time Wales in a sporting context has stood up to make a sport theirs. Rugby from there on in became synonymous with the nation. Next time we'll be looking close at how rugby and football developed in 20th century Wales. A nation growing into an ever-changing world, how would the two sports adapt and evolve in this era? Was rugby the nation's true national sport, or was football quietly staking its own claim? Make sure to like, comment and subscribe, and we'll see you again next time.